The hardwood floor of a WNBA arena is more than just a playing surface. It is a stage, a proving ground, a carefully managed territory where narratives are baked into the very grain of the wood. For decades, the story of women's professional basketball in America was one of grit, perseverance, and a quiet, collective struggle for respect. The players were warriors, but the battle was often framed as a united front against external indifference. The script was unwritten but deeply understood. Promote the game, uplift your sisters, and above all, protect the culture that was so painstakingly built. The heroes were those who embodied this ethos, players like Sue Bird, whose legendary career was a masterclass in brilliant, selfless point guard play, leadership, and longevity. She wasn't just a player, she became an architect, a media voice, a guardian of the game's soul. The culture was the fortress, and its guardians were vigilant. Then came the earthquake named Caitlyn Clark. She didn't just enter the league. She arrived as a cultural tsunami, pulling millions of people in her wake who had never before cared about a regular season women's basketball game. She shattered attendance records, rewrote television ratings benchmarks, and turned social media into a continuous highlight reel of audacious, logo-range three-pointers. Logic in its purest business sense would dictate that such a phenomenon would be embraced, celebrated, and protected as the golden ticket the league had always dreamed of. But within the fortress, the tremors she caused were felt not as opportunity, but as a threat to the very foundations. This is the story of that clash. It is not a simple tale of jealousy or rivalry. It is a profound and revealing conflict about power, control, and the terrifying, exhilarating moment when an institution's carefully crafted narrative is hijacked by a force it cannot contain. It's about what happens when the spotlight finds its own target, and the gatekeepers find themselves suddenly standing in the dark, holding a script nobody is reading anymore. The evidence was not subjective. It was etched in data. Cities Caitlyn Clark visited saw arena capacities leap from 60% to 100%, with ticket prices on the secondary market soaring to NBA playoff levels. Television ratings for her games didn't just inch up. They doubled, then tripled previous highs. Jerseys with her number 22 flew off shelves, outselling the rest of the league combined. A Caitlyn Clark effect was officially acknowledged by media analysts, a rare designation for a rookie. She was, by every measurable metric, the most impactful athlete in the history of the sport. There is a Caitlyn Clark effect on all of basketball and especially on women's basketball ratings, commentators would say. Kudos to her. She has elevated an entire sport. But elevation is a disorienting experience for those accustomed to the old altitude. Within the ecosystem of the WNBA, a tight-knit world of veterans, executives, and legacy media partners, Clark's success presented an uncomfortable paradox. Her stardom was undeniable, but it was different. It wasn't forged solely within the sanctum of the league's system. It was born on viral Twitter clips, fueled by a college career of record-breaking must-see TV, and validated by a mainstream audience that didn't know the league's intricate history or its unspoken codes. She hadn't waited her turn. She had built her own door and blown it off its hinges. On the court, the physical response was immediate and visceral. Defenders greeted her with a level of physicality that walked the line between intense and excessive, elbows in the ribs, hard shoves on cuts, tackles disguised as hustle plays. It was a time-honored welcome for rookies, amplified to a deafening degree. Yet, the usual chorus of veteran voices and media figures who would rightly decry dangerous play for other stars were conspicuously, diplomatically quiet. The silence was not an accident, it was a message. It said, "This is the price of admission. This is what happens when you disrupt the equilibrium." Meanwhile, in the media sphere controlled by league partners like ESPN, a parallel narrative quietly took shape. While Clark's highlights dominated SportsCenter, the feature stories, the panel discussions, the framing of the league's future began to subtly coalesce around a different name, Paige Bueckers. Talented, polished, charismatic, and crucially, a player whose style and public persona felt more familiar, more aligned with the traditional archetype of the women's basketball star. She was framed as the complete package, the heir apparent. A telling moment came during a segment on ESPN. The graphic flashed, Team USA 2028 forecast, Paige, Bueckers, and the young stars on the rise. The analysis that followed focused on Bueckers as the natural leader of the next generation. Caitlyn Clark was mentioned, but as a component and included talent, not the focal point. The omission from the headline was a small thing, but in the world of narrative building, small things are bricks. Online, sharp-eyed fans and independent commentators called it out. Sue Bird does not rock with you the way you think she does, one popular analyst stated bluntly in a video dissection. They don't even put Caitlyn Clark in none of the damn graphics on the show. This is crazy. Caitlyn, you got to see what's going on. And Caitlyn Clark was seeing it. She saw the omissions. She felt the physical toll. She heard the pauses that followed her name in interviews with certain legends, the subtle qualifiers, great scorer, or tremendous draw, however, that always seemed to loop back to concepts like playing the right way within the system and understanding the whole picture. The league was experiencing unprecedented growth, but a cold tension simmered beneath the celebratory headlines. It was the tension between the organically chosen face of the sport and the anointed one. The turning point was not public. It happened in a sterile conference room 3 weeks before the storm broke publicly. No cameras, no microphones, just a long table around which sat the unelected council of the game's present and past. There were league executives, former players turned advisors, and influential media figures whose opinions shaped internal perceptions. Among them, embodying the confluence of all these roles, was Sue Bird. Caitlyn Clark walked in alone. She came not with arrogance but with the concrete proof of her impact. Binders of data showing the correlation between her schedule and league-wide spikes in engagement, merchandise reports, social media analytics that formed mountains of evidence. She expected, perhaps naively, a conversation about leverage, about how to harness this momentum for the greater good of the league. She was prepared to talk business. What she walked into was a cultural audit. The atmosphere was polite but cool. The data was acknowledged, then set aside. The conversation, steered deftly by the veterans in the room, particularly Bird, pivoted from metrics to philosophy. It was about sustainability, about the kind of growth that lasts. It was about the responsibility that comes with visibility, about ensuring that the spotlight benefits the collective, not just the individual. The language was dense with noble concepts: protecting the ecosystem, honoring the foundation, the WNBA way. Clark listened, her composure a mask. The subtext, however, was crystalline. Her kind of stardom, loud, individualistic, stat-shattering, and born outside the traditional pipelines, was viewed as a potential toxin. It was too flashy, too reliant on deep threes and audacious passes, too different from the gritty, team-oriented, inside-out basketball that was the league's proud identity. The message, delivered in the calm, assured tones of those who have earned the right to speak, was, "You are a phenomenon, but you are not the model. Fall in line. Dim your light so others can share the glow." She thanked them for their time and left. The meeting was not a dialogue. It was a verdict. They had looked at the most powerful engine for growth the sport had ever known and decided it needed to be retrofitted to match their blueprint. That night, something in Caitlyn Clark hardened. The very next game, she played not with anger but with a cold, focused fury. She dropped 38 points, drilling 7 three-pointers from distances that defied coaching manuals. She celebrated aggressively, stared down defenders, and played with a "you want to see it, I'll show you" defiance that electrified the sold-out crowd. She was done trying to fit a template. She would be the template. Privately, to her inner circle, the disillusionment crystallized into a devastatingly simple metaphor. Why would I keep building a house for people who won't let me live in it? The line leaked. It always does. And with it, the conflict moved from the shadows of boardrooms into the dim light of the public's suspicion. Sue Bird's response to the brewing storm was textbook establishment. In media appearances, her language was measured, framed as concern for the bigger picture. She spoke of misunderstandings and different perspectives, always circling back to the sacred idea of the culture and the game itself. It was a performance of benevolent authority, implying that Clark, in her youth and phenomenal success, simply didn't yet grasp the complexities of what she was a part of. Clark, however, had grasped it all too well. She agreed to a prime-time, no-holds-barred interview with a major network. The establishment held its breath. On air, Clark was calm but unflinching. She spoke of the constant pressure to be grateful, a word she dissected with surgical precision. "I am grateful," she said, "for my family, my coaches, the fans who stand in line for hours. But gratitude shouldn't be a one-way street." She then flipped the script, detailing what the league itself might be grateful for. The sold-out arenas that were once half-empty, the millions of new eyes, the little girls shooting from the logo in their driveways. When asked about veterans and legends, she didn't name names. She didn't need to. "There are people," she said, her gaze steady on the camera, "whose idea of what a star should be, how they should act, how they should play, it's based on a different time. I'm not from that time. I play my game. And my game is filling the seats they couldn't fill. Maybe that means it's not me who needs to change. Maybe it's the idea that needs to change." The interview was a declaration of independence. Clips exploded across the internet. The fortress walls shook. Bird's official response came 18 hours later via a carefully crafted social media statement. It praised sustainable growth built on respecting the game and the process. Then came the condescending dagger. Some people understood immediately. Others clearly still have work to do. The paternalistic dismissal, "You have work to do," ignited Clark's supporters. It confirmed every suspicion that this was about hierarchy, not basketball. Clark's counter was swift and devastating. She didn't post a rant. She posted a fact. A simple, undeniable contrast, a side-by-side image. On one side, a quote from a veteran talking about the golden era and protecting the culture. On the other, a screenshot of a half-empty arena from that very era, with a caption listing the average attendance and TV ratings from those years. The caption was quiet. "Culture is important, but relevance is survival." The illusion shattered. The culture being so fiercely protected was, in terms of mainstream sports relevance, a niche. Clark wasn't disrespecting the past. She was exposing the uncomfortable truth that the past was not the commercially viable future. She had become the future, single-handedly. The battle lines were now publicly drawn. Legacy versus momentum. Tradition versus disruption. The guardians of the culture versus the engine of relevance. Other legends like Diana Taurasi entered the fray, posting about paying dues and the league existing beyond any one player. The intent was to recenter the institution. But the internet, that great ironist, resurrected old articles and clips from Taurasi's own early career, labeling her brash, cocky, and controversial. The hypocrisy was laid bare. The very traits that made Taurasi a legend were now being framed as flaws in Clark. The difference was one of scale and control. Clark's impact was too big, too public, and too independent to be managed. Then came the leak that changed everything. An audio clip, 40 seconds long, surfaced from a private conversation among several WNBA veterans. The subject was the Clark problem. The frustration wasn't about her basketball IQ or work ethic. It was visceral, personal. It was about resentment. Resentment that her arrival made their own years of struggle and accomplishment seem smaller by comparison. Frustration that the crowds and cameras followed her, not the right people. Fear that their influence was being eclipsed. One voice lamented, "She's making it look like we didn't move the needle. We built this." The mask was off. This was never about the right way to play. It was about power, territory, and the painful human fear of being rendered obsolete. The audio confirmed Clark's deepest understanding. She was seen as a threat to a legacy, not a successor to it. In the face of this exposed pettiness, Clark did the most powerful thing she could. She said nothing. She issued no fiery rebuttal. Instead, she posted a single powerful image. It was a candid shot of her after a game, sweat still on her brow, surrounded by a sea of young fans, mostly girls but boys too, their faces alight with awe, holding out jerseys, basketballs, and posters. She was signing autographs, making eye contact. In the middle of a pool zing, adoring crowd that stretched as far as the camera could see. The caption was a single emoji, folded hands. The message was deafening in its silence. This is who I play for. This is the house I'm building. This is the culture right here. It was no longer a defense. It was a testament. The fans, the new generation, the undeniable energy, they were her legitimacy, her authority, and her unassailable truth. The aftermath is a cold, new reality. The WNBA finds itself in an arena it didn't build, filled with a roar it doesn't fully recognize. The old gatekeepers still hold their titles, but their authority has been fundamentally undermined. You cannot lecture on relevance to someone who is its very definition. You cannot teach humility to a phenomenon that has humbled your entire business model. Sue Bird and the old guard are not villains. They are custodians of a world they built with their blood, sweat, and tears, watching a new, unpredictable force rewrite the rules of engagement. Their fear is genuine, but in their attempt to manage Clark, they revealed the limitations of their control. Caitlyn Clark, for her part, plays on. The physical play continues. The media narratives still occasionally swerve away from her, but the tension has shifted. It is no longer about whether she will be accepted. It is about whether the institution can adapt fast enough to keep her. She has proven she doesn't need the league's validation. The league desperately needs her power. The real story is no longer about picks and rolls, but about power dynamics. It's about who gets to tell the story of a sport. Is it the architects of the past, or the undeniable force of the present? Is it the careful curators of a culture, or the roaring crowd that has finally found a reason to show up? In that quiet image of Clark signing autographs, the answer lies. The future isn't whispered in closed-door meetings. It's screaming in packed arenas, trending on social media, and being etched into record books. The fortress has been breached not by a siege, but by an invitation to a bigger, louder, and far less controllable game. And the millions who have accepted it are no longer asking for permission to come inside. They are already there, changing the very nature of the space, one roaring cheer for number 22 at a time. The arena and the echo within it will never be the same.